Hi, and welcome back to What to Expect When You're Transitioning. And I want to thank everybody who's back and managed to make it through my first video, which I kind of have a feeling was a rather long-winded and presumptuous exposition on what I was thinking and bordered on arrogance and a presumptiveness that I have some kind of idea of what's going on in the world. But anyway, I want to start getting into some details of what I've been through at this point. And I like to look at things as either a thought problem or a metaphor. So please give me a little bit of time to meander before I hit the main point because um, life is exceedingly complex, I find, and in that complexity, there's a lot of what ifs, but what about, think about, and I like trying to get down to the kernel of the truth, which means I start trying to create metaphors or thought problems that strip out all of the complexity and try to get down to the simplicity. Now, there's a problem with that. There's a potential problem with that type of thinking because you can end up going, well, okay, I have some thinking for a very simple situation, but the world's not simple. But I kind of look at it as going into, well, what's what kind of simplicity can I start with that creates this kernel of truth that I can build on and create more complexity out of? So I kind of look at transition as a metaphor, like trying to figure out how to build a house. Now, if we think about how to build a house, we don't think about, well, what kind of window treatments, what kind of furniture are we going to put inside? What's the master bathroom going to look like? What are the shutters and furniture sitting on the wraparound patio going to look like? We got to start by really looking at what kind of plot of land are we building the house on the first place? Are we going to build it on a beautiful plantation outside of Charleston, South Carolina, where a beautiful southern mansion with a beautiful wraparound porch and beautiful shutters and window treatments and beautiful furniture and beautiful lattice work on the porch, wraparound porches? Or are we going to start thinking, are we looking at a plot of land that's maybe up in New England where it's more maybe formal, less southern style, or maybe we're looking at a rich outer suburb where it's a different type of building, or maybe we're looking at a plot of land that's in a middle class suburb where, yep, that's not a mansion, that's a 3 bedroom cape for a family of four. Or are we looking at maybe a plot of land that's in the middle of the woods, where the fourth wall of the house we're going to build is going to be the granite hillside is going to be built up against? So, and I kind of looked at the way I approached transition, the way I understood in support groups that other transgender women approach transition, and I realized that for a lot of us, we looked at it as, at first, what are all these window treatments? You know, these clothing, makeup, hairstyles, wigs, all that going to do, instead of looking at as I go back to critical thinking, what's the plot of land going to look like? What kind of land are we even building it on? Um, for example, are we building it? Are we building this house on soil that's fairly easy to for 10 or 12 guys to take a bunch of shovels to and dig out some foundations to pour some concrete foundations in? Or are we building it on a plot of land that's pretty much granite basalt rock that needs to be jackhammered and drilled into and dynamited to create the space for foundations? And so all those questions that I think that I got, I missed when I went into transition. And I really wish that maybe one or two of those amazing, caring professionals that helped me in the beginning of my transition had said, hey, knucklehead, and again, critical thinking, I was born with an extra thick skull genetically. That means I don't respond very well to a compassionate, hey, what are you thinking about? I more respond to a compassionate smack upside the head and hey, knucklehead. So I wish one or two of them had said, hey, knucklehead, look at what you got. Where are you? What kind of land are you building on? What kind of property is it? And it might have saved me a heck of a lot of, what do I want to say? Angst, anxiety, frustration, and believe it or not, money. I spent a lot of money on beautiful latticework porch furniture for these wonderful wraparound porches and beautiful pink shutters with lots of pretty designs and awesome window treatments and furniture because, oh, wasn't that amazing that I could all of a sudden get this stuff? Oops. Yep. Kind of missed. Spent a bunch of money that I really wish I had back now. But, so I really wish somebody had said, hey, look at what you got. Look at where you're at. Don't think criticizingly, think critically. What do you have? What don't you have? Do you have a piece of property that a graceful southern mansion that you want to buy all this stuff for is going to look good on? Or do you have a piece of property that's going to look a lot better with a couple of log benches and plain wood planter box under the windows with a few daisies in it? That's kind of what happened to me. Now we talk about first of all what kind of land we're building on and building the foundations into, and that actually for me kind of goes into the whole mental health, gender dysphoria issues, which I found were really quite well dealt with early on in my transition. Yes, some things were missed later on, I believe, but the things that were missed later on were more about my inadequacies and my inability to communicate what I was going through rather than anybody missing anything. So I don't want to go there. I want to go into, I'll go there later because I feel I personally missed things. And, but I want to talk to others about things that something that I felt was totally, I wish somebody had said something to me and I'd either read it in the forums or the discussion posts, because I did a lot of research and education when I started my transition. And this issue I never saw brought up. No therapist brought it up. No professional brought it up. Never came up in discussion groups. It was way under the radar, and I totally missed it. And I really think it's pretty much the basics of the lay of the land, and it's pretty much the voice. Anybody who's listening to this voice and simply turns off the video is going to go, dude, fairly straightforward. The voice really, I went through 4 very painful experiences where my voice absolutely betrayed me and created, at best, a painful experience, and at worst, an absolutely horrifying experience. And the least painful experience was one time I was in a convenience store, and I was off to the side where the 2 clerks couldn't see me, and there were 2 other groups of people in the store, a mom and her child. I'm pretty sure it was a mom and her child, and older, I believe, man and wife. And I was off to the side where the 2 clerks behind the counter couldn't see me, and I heard one say to the other, "Pervert alert." And I knew darn right well who they were talking to, because they'd heard my voice, and I was dressed feminine. And at that point, I kind of decided that discretion was the better part of valor. So I simply put down the fountain drink or whatever I was making for myself that I'd decided I wanted to buy from this convenience store, and walked out saying to myself, if these clerks who represent the owners of the convenience store are saying that, this convenience store really doesn't want my money, so I'm choosing not to spend it there. And I decided not to create any kind of confrontation. I tend not to be a very confrontational person. That's one of my weaknesses. I'm not a get up in your face type of person out in public. So I just, as I said, I walked away, but the pervert alert, that really stung. What is, what is. And really, the voice, I found, is a showstopper. For me, at least. And again, I'm not going to pretend to be an expert on what any one of you is thinking. How you believe and perceive your voice is absolutely your business. How I perceive my voice is my business. And I'm the expert on me. So, seriously, for me, I found the voice was an absolute showstopper. In fact, you put this voice on, say, Taylor Swift's body, walk into a convenience store with those 2 clerks off to the side, you're going to get another pervert alert. That's the audio of the voice I found is a real thing. And again, I can hear the questions coming out of the imaginary audience behind me or in front of me. And I'm going to pass on them for a few moments. But I didn't address the voice issue until really at least 3.5 to 4 years into my transition. And I wish I had attacked it a lot sooner, because I could have realized where I was at and saved myself a lot of time and anxiety. And pretty much voices come in, the masculine flavor, which averages around 120 decibels. Um, Again, please don't quote me on this. This isn't, I don't know the exact number, but it's a close enough for government work number. And the average feminine voice, I believe, clocks in around 240 decibels, higher pitch. And somewhere in the middle, about 180 decibels, is a androgynous voice. And I kind of look at my voice and voice for me in general, and this is, again, from my perspective, not any one of your perspectives. It's just my way of thinking about it. Is I kind of look at it as the customer service test. If I called up, say, Procter and Gamble, a very fine company, make very good cleaning products. I use a couple of their cleaning products in my residence, believe it or not. If I called up Procter and Gamble and said, "Hey, your new laundry detergent, Autumn Sunset, turned all my underwear puke green and burned holes in it," the customer service rep is going to look down at their script and say, and read, "I'm sorry," and parentheses, "sir, ma'am," and they're going to read right off their script and say, "I'm sorry, sir," because guess what? Over the phone, this voice is male. Now, if I call up Procter and Gamble and say, "Hey, your new laundry detergent, Autumn Sunset, turned all my bras and panties puke green and burned holes in them," what's going to happen? Well, probably one of two things. A customer service rep is going to go, "I'm sorry, sir," or I'm sorry. Yeah. Um, the audio of the voice at this pitch or decibel level is very overwhelming of a very overwhelming indication of the gender of the person that's being talked to. Now, to get to the questions that I can hear, and not only the questions I can hear, but comments that were made to me by providers. "Hey, you have a voice that, kind of sounds average male, and why haven't you trained it?" Or out in the audience, "Hey, go train your voice and stop whinging and complaining about having a male voice to us." And this kind of gets back to the point of, I remember I said I didn't address the voice issue until 3.5, 4 years. Unfortunately, this voice is a trained voice. This voice started out way the heck deep with a lot of deep long, deep, strong vocal cords and chest resonance. I can't even get down to where I was 10 years ago with my voice. I inherited from my mother. My mother had a deep voice, feminine but deep. My father had a very deep, gravelly male voice. I ended up with a genetic combination of long, thick vocal cords with a good, strong vocal box and lots of chest resonance that I got an exceptionally deep voice. Kind of go back to 2, 3 decades ago, there was this urban myth of, and I don't know if it still exists or not, that white men can't jump, which is an urban myth because I believe that not only are there a lot of men of many races who are athletically unable to jump, but there's a lot of men and women of a lot of races who athletically can't jump. And I was born very male with a very deep voice, and therefore it only went a certain distance. But let's go into voice training for a second and talk about the various options that are available for those of you out there who weren't born as male and deep voiced as I was. Um, First option I looked into was personal one-on-one coaches, and that I ended up looking at two websites. And the second website I looked at the cost of the individual session and went, irk, that's way out of my price range. So then I looked into voice training from hospitals or medical centers, which is actually potentially very good option, believe it or not. And in fact, if I'd at the beginning of my transition, if I'd been told about it, I might well have sunk the money into it. But remember, at this point, I was about 3.5+ years in, and I already had a lot of lost costs sunk into clothing and other items that I couldn't work with, because the thing is, medical training tends to be covered by insurance, but there's this lovely thing known as copays. And I realized, even at $25 or $30 a copay, 15 or 20 sessions, we're running into the $500 range, and that was starting to look like a bit pricey for where I was at that point. So I put it aside as a potential option to look at and possibly save money for. And then I looked at the third option, our friend, the internet, which there's a lot out there on the internet. For instance, there's Gertruda's German voice training for $25.99. Gertruda will turn you into a German-sounding woman, or you will pay her another $25. Yikes, not for me. Or, the Russian accented woman who for $29.99 will turn you into a beautifully accented Russian woman. And I realized that, based on the broken English on her website, that maybe there might be another $299 hidden payment coming off my credit card. I went, eek, nope. But I kept on looking, and there actually are a lot of potentially legitimate looking businesses out there, and I started sorting them. Many of them say they have credentials in voice training. Some of them say they have masters in voice training, and there were a couple that had PhDs in voice training. In fact, one, and I don't remember the name of the site. Unfortunately, that's lost in a phone whose battery died a year and a half ago and is absolutely non-recoverable at this point. If I try to boot up the phone, the battery dies halfway into the boot up process. That's how dead that battery is. So that's lost but it was a provider who had a PhD who had a practice in New York City, where she provided voice training for, I know, transgender and other folk too. And the price was actually quite reasonable. I remember it was around $75 or $80 for several internet sessions. And she also provided she provided, what would I say, a demo of a couple of her sessions, 5 or 10 minutes of the hour plus session. And looked like a fairly reasonable entry point for me to try. So, I went with the education and the reviews from satisfied clients, and I went with it, and I really went full bore into it. And it was really, for $80, I think it was, outstanding value for the money, because instead of just simply 6 sessions with somebody, I had these 6 sessions that I could repeat and work through the exercises. Not only that, she was very clear on the fact that I didn't want to spend 4 or 5 hours a day working on the voice, or I could strain and potentially wreck the voice. So I worked I worked it hard for 6, 7, 8 months, and I saw the voice definitely rising. As I said, I can't get back to the voice I once had through the training. That voice is lost forever. Thank you. That voice really frustrated the heck out of me. This voice still frustrates the heck out of me, believe it or not. But that voice really, really frustrated the heck out of me. So, but I kind of came, as I worked through all of these lessons, I started coming to this realization that I was running into the limits of anatomy and physiology and physics. I had a long, thick set of vocal cords with a long, strong vocal box, and I realized that just like I would never be able to jump to dunk a basketball, I would never be able to reach a feminine sounding voice. In fact, I realized it's just like I'm never ever going to be able to jump to even touch the bottom of the net with my fingers. I'm never going to reach the androgynous, maybe, maybe not voice because of the limits of my anatomy. And what happened was, roundabout, as I said, 3.5 years in, I started on this process. So it was maybe about 4.25, 4.5 years. I started having to come to this realization that my dream of a feminine sound, maybe actually my dream of a feminine sounding voice wasn't going to happen, and my dream of maybe having some kind of might be feminine voice was not going to happen either. And the problem is, I realized the problem was, if I'd attacked this problem like a month into transition, I might have realized that about 9 months in, and instead of having to deal with a dream that was over 4.5 years old at that point, I would have only had to deal with a dream that was 9 months old, and it might have been easier to come to what I call an acknowledgement of the fact that what is what is. And I know DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, talks about acceptance, and I will never be able to accept the fact that I can't have a feminine sounding voice, unfortunately. I've realized that. However, I've had to come to the realization that I must acknowledge the fact that I won't have it. For me, acceptance almost means that, kumbaya, it's all good, I'll never have it, no more worries. Nope. For me, acknowledgement means, damn, I wish I had a much better voice. And I will always have to face the fact that as I hear my voice, I wish it were better. But, and as I said, I wonder what would have happened if instead of 4.5, 4.75 years in, I had to face the reality of a broken dream that was over 4 years old and took me a lot longer to come to some kind of basic acknowledgement of, instead of maybe 9 months in, if I'd come to this acknowledgement of the dream wasn't going to happen, it might have been a lot quicker to overcome. Not only that, but for everyone out there, for all of you out there who have a voice that is trainable, think about it this way. How much easier would your life be if, when this video ended, you jumped on the voice training today if you haven't started? How much easier would it be to pass? How much easier, how much less angst you would go through? I mean, if my voice had started here, how much easier, how much less angst would I have felt if I'd started attacking it at month 1 instead of, 3.5 years or month 42 in? How many months would I have saved of angst and anxiety? Really, the way I look at it, and this is just me looking at it, believe it or not, I'm not claiming to say any of that I know better than any of you, because I don't. I've learned throughout my life I'm wrong way more often than I'm right. So I may be wrong as heck about almost all of you. And the voice may not be any kind of issue for you. I may be just super sensitive to my voice and have a massive hang up about my voice. That's possibly a very fair criticism of me. But for anybody who does have any kind of vocal issues, maybe, and again, the voice, I never heard a thing about the voice until I started getting 3.5 years into the transition. Nobody really, I never heard much about voice training. It was kind of like a hidden thing. Let me give you an example. Remember I talked about the pervert alert? Let me give you another example. Sometime about a year and a half ago, I was actually in an airport, and I was dressed like this as a male, and I was walking through the airport, and I saw two young, 21-year-old women holding hands, and I didn't really even give them a second thought. I was just like, wow, two young girlfriends. Isn't it great that we're in the past 2020 and they don't have to worry about holding hands in an airport and getting harassed by redneck security? And one of them said something to the other, and I did a really fast head whip. Not really much of a head whip, more than an eye whip. And I took a look at the young lady, careful look at the young lady who spoke, because her voice totally gave her away to my ears. And then my eyes, I was able to put together the very subtle clues and the differences of proportion, and I got the real strong suspicion that she was transgender. I didn't say anything to her because that would have been incredibly rude and potentially dangerous. But I wanted to go up and say to her, hey, honey, get your voice up about 20 decibels and you'll sound amazing, and you look amazing. Because guess what? I used to, when I started being transgender, of course, I looked at, how shall we say, the instructional artwork, or the more technical term for it, smut of what was possible for a transgender female to look like. And I was like, wow, some of these transgender women look amazingly like women. Until as I started going through the transition process and learning about the exact differences between male and female measurements, I was able to catch a couple of proportional clues. But the number one clue I finally realized I could catch to determine that over 50% of those images were CGI was the fact that the shading of the organ on the front was wrong for the skin color of the person. Believe it or not, I found that was the easiest way. And all of a sudden, instead of looking at instructional artwork, it became a game of, can I spot which ones are CGI? And after, maybe a month of instructional and then a month and a half of the game of, oh, CGI, CGI, CGI. Yep, that's not CGI. It's not perfect enough. I kind of realized, yeah, why look at that? Why look at that? But really, the voice, and as I said, I had the pervert alert experience and three other actually absolutely horrifying experiences that I'm not going to go into here because I don't want to relive them really. But bottom line is where the voice really in the end betrayed me, and I realized that the voice for me determined exactly what I was going to be able to do and not do with the transition, which I really wish somebody had said to me at the beginning. This is one of the things I wish somebody had said to me at the beginning. Hey, this is something you gotta look at carefully and think about dealing with right away, because if it can't be fixed, it might just be a game stopper. And if it can be fixed, it's going to make your life a heck of a lot easier. So that's kind of my thinking on this video. Hey, the voice may be a game stopper for you. Probably isn't. I'm probably way off base. But it may make your life a heck of a lot easier too if you jump on it right away. So that's where I want to go. And then I want to go, hopefully on the next video, into potentially the longest and most expensive part of the transitioning process, which, believe it or not, is not the gender affirmation surgery. It's another really dark, not dark, but deeply not talked about part that, again, I wish I'd attacked it, started realizing how complex it was to deal with and how expensive it was to deal with a month or two in. So I could have maybe gotten on top of it instead of piecemealing it, dealing with it with a purpose. So that's kind of where I'm looking at. But yeah, starting with it's building a house. The foundation, the ground we're putting the foundation into is really the mental part, which is well researched and well dealt with, as long as the patient isn't somebody like me who had troubles expressing what they were feeling. But then you start getting into the land, the voice, and other building blocks. Are you building on land that's forested property with right next to a granite hill? Or are you building on a plot of land that's going to call for a really pretty house? Are you building with a logs, or are you building with beautiful masonry and well put together? So that's what I want to talk about. So everyone out there, take care and live a beautiful life that you deserve. God bless you.